If you got a guy singing a folk song about his sorrows and his troubles, and he's got an acoustic guitar and he's got the harmonica, I'll probably like it. You know, we've gone back and forth with reading comments on the show, and we're going to settle on a rhythm now that I think will work. Now that, and I've never been quite sure what to do with the comment section, but now that we're here and we got the fish cam and we got the fish, and it's just calmed me down a bit, maybe see things clearly. I think what we're going to do is we're going to read one comment, the most interesting comment, or at least the one that teased me up to talk about something that I want to talk about. And we'll do this once a week. We'll do it at the last show of the week. And so here we are. And so we've got several comments with the same theme. And these are not the most interesting comments, but they do tee me up to talk about what I want to talk about, which I said is either interesting and or it's just an excuse for me to talk about something I want to talk about. So let's see. Herbert Not Hoover says, well, now we have to know what these top 10 albums are. Moria says, give us the albums, big bro. Sweet Baby Bartnick says, please give us your top 10 albums of all time. Right, so I mentioned like a week ago that despite what people may assume about me, I am not someone who hates all modern music or insists that they stop making real music in the 70s or whatever. I think people would probably assume they would assume that I either have that opinion or that I just don't listen to music at all. And I think that all music is terrible. And that's actually not true. I actually love music, and my top albums, my personal favorites, are all from the past, or mostly, almost all, from the past like 10 or 20 years. So I'm a big fan of modern music. I am an apologist for modern music. I actually think that there's a lot of great modern music. Some of the best music has been made in the last 20 years. I think some of the best movies have been made in the last 20 years too, by the way. And so some people have asked me to go ahead and give my list, my top albums. I'm told that the control room is also very interested in hearing this. They may be the only ones interested. It may be just them and me. And so, I don't know. But regardless, I will provide my list. We'll do that now. And to be clear, this is not a list of the greatest albums of all time. I'm not saying these are the greatest. I'm saying these are my personal favorites. That's it. I also think they're good, obviously, but I'm not trying to make some kind of all-time list here. These are just my go-tos, my favorites. And some of these are also kind of obscure. So I think if you're hoping for some kind of contrarian, shocking take about albums you've heard of, where, I come out and say that actually my favorite albums are Taylor Swift and Cardi B or something, then you're going to be disappointed, because that's not my take. I'm just going to tell you. So this is I'll give you my top like 5 or 6 in no order. So first, I like Southern rock. I like country rock. There's a Southern rock band called the Drive-By Truckers and they're what I would consider to be like real country music, the kind of country that I like. They have an album called Decoration Day, which is my favorite of theirs. They also have another one called Brighter Than Creation's Dark that I might like. I might like that one even more, depending on my mood. Just good Southern rock. Now, they're also definitely a liberal, and I think they endorsed Biden in the last election. Total libs for sure. But look, if you're going to refuse to listen to any musician with progressive politics, then you've really ruled out like all of them, almost all the good ones, unfortunately. So artists are crazy. They're dumb. They have dumb they're dumb about politics very often. And so that's all kind of baked into cake. It is what it is. Next, there's a Scottish, I told you these are kind of obscure. And I'm not trying to be cool. Like I'm not trying to be cool by saying, oh, all my favorites are stuff you've never heard of. It is what it is. So there's a Scottish indie rock band called Frightened Rabbit. And definitely not beating the hipster allegations with this, but it is what it is. And anyway, Midnight Organ Fight is a great album. There's a song on that album called Modern Leper that is fantastic. One of my favorite bands of all time. I like Scottish rock in general, Scottish alternative rock for some reason. I just like it. And I think they're the best of the bunch. Then I would say, a little more well-known, Arcade Fire. They have 3 classic albums. Their new stuff kind of sucks. I think they get a bad rap these days because because their new stuff isn't very good, and also because they get blamed for spawning a bunch of really bad hipster copycats in the early 2000s. And I think that that's unfair. That's like blaming Tarantino for all the bad Tarantino ripoffs. Can't blame him for that, right? So my favorite album of theirs is called Neon Bible. Suburbs and Funeral are both also really good. I think most people will probably say Funeral is their best. I don't know. But I like Neon Bible. Next, I would go with, again, these are just my favorites. White Lighter by the band Typhoon. Typhoon's another indie rock band. I like indie rock. I don't know what to tell you. I like indie rock and I like IPAs. I do. I'll listen to indie rock while I drink an IPA. Okay? So deal with it. Just deal with it. It's a good album. I mean, it wrestles with some really deep, weighty themes like death, mortality. But the sound is not bleak. This is one of those bands that has like 12 members and they've got a horn section. I like big bands with lots of instruments. And so there's this kind of tension between the lyrics, which are sometimes really kind of angry and in some ways bleak, but the sound, which is really vibrant and kind of joyous. And I think that's interesting. And so I like bands like that. And I also like artists. I like the big bands like that. And I also like, if it's just a guy, an acoustic guitar and a harmonica. So I like that sound as well. And that brings me to my next one. Maybe my least well-known pick, or I don't know, but my favorite folk artist alive today, and I think the best songwriter alive today, is a guy named Joe Pug. And his album, actually it's an EP called Nation of Heat, is one of my personal all-time favorites. I love all his albums. All of his stuff is fantastic. Nation of Heat is the one I probably play the most. He's got a song on that album called Hymn 101, which I think is one of the greatest folk songs of all time, period. He's kind of the proper successor to Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, those guys. His lyrics, especially in this album, are a little bit more enigmatic. But he writes poetry. He's a poet. He's an artist. Nation of Heat is a masterpiece, I think. And if there's one guy that you hear, if there's one band or artist that because of what I'm saying, you go look them up, I would say it should be this guy. And then finally, one more. So this is my top 6, I think. I think I'm on 6. I have one album not from this century, a personal favorite. And I was thinking about this because as a 90s kid, I love 90s music. And I'm a defender of 90s music. I think that 90s music, I actually think the first decade of the 2000s had better music, but I think that 90s music was really good, was great. And I will go to the mat to say it was a better decade for music, certainly than the 80s and even than the 70s. My personal favorite from that time, at least the one that holds up the most for me, would be Counting Crows, August and Everything After. And I don't know how much of my enjoyment of that album is just pure nostalgia. It could just be that. If you don't have the nostalgic attachment to it, and you've never heard the songs and you listen to it, I don't know what your experience will be. But it's hard for me to separate the two. And, Mr. Jones, Rain King, Omaha, Murder of One, just nothing but 90s hits. Lyrics for Counting Crows in their heyday were nonsensical. You listen to the song Mr. Jones, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all. But it's vibes. It's just pure vibes, really. It's just, it feels like the lyrics don't mean anything, but it kind of feels like something. You kind of get you kind of understand what he's trying to convey because the song feels a certain way. And I like that. So those are my top. I mean, there are others that kind of honorable mentions. There's a couple different Old Crow Medicine Show albums, bluegrass band that I like. I used to really like the Avett Brothers. I haven't liked any of their albums in the last 10 or 15 years, but in the first decade of the 2000s, they put out some good stuff. And then there's other guys like Tyler Childers has definitely gone woke big time, but his album Purgatory is great. Zach Bryan, I think he's got some good stuff. He just put out an anti-ice song that was really cringe and embarrassing, but again, just kind of like bluesy American folk. I like bluesy American folk. If you got a guy singing a folk song about his sorrows and his troubles, and he's got an acoustic guitar and he's got the harmonica, I'll probably like it. Like, I won't hate it. I can listen to almost anything like that. And then most of the classic indie bands from the early 2000s I like. I can listen to still. And there's some other 90s stuff. Some of it doesn't hold up for me. Even the one, like, I would say that Nirvana, Nevermind is probably the best album of the 90s. I don't listen to that anymore. I couldn't sit down and listen to a grunge album at the age of 39, but I respect it anyway, for at least artistically. So, okay, there's my list. There you have it for all those few who are interested. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.